Hello and welcome back to If History Had Read It. Thank you for joining me here in our quiet corner of the internet. Find your comfortable position, let your shoulders soften, and allow the day to recede. We are about to take a journey, not through the grand palaces of emperors or the celebrated fields of great battles, but into the quiet anxieties of ordinary lives. Our path tonight wanders through bustling markets, along dusty pilgrim roads, and into the raw, hopeful heart of frontier towns. We are going to explore a feeling as old as currency itself. A quiet and universal sting, the moment of realizing you have been cheated. We will delve into a world of fake miracle cures, dishonest merchants, and promises that shimmered like gold, only to dissolve into dust. This is a journey into the timeless world of historical hustles, cons, and swindles. If you enjoy what we do and find some comfort in these stories from the past, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Your quiet support allows us to continue unearthing these forgotten voices and sharing them here in our library of whispers. It is deeply appreciated. Now, settle in. Tonight, our journey is not to a single time or place, but through the ages, guided by a single, universal human complaint. It is the feeling of a trust betrayed, the hollow space left behind by a clever deception. We will listen to 4 quiet accounts from 4 different centuries that prove the struggle between the hopeful and the hustler is as old as civilization itself. From the careful silk weavers of Han Dynasty China to the desperate gold seekers of the far north, the desire for a better life has always created fertile ground for those who would exploit it. We begin in the East, in a city that was once the very center of the world, where a son watches his father chase a dream of eternal life, a dream with a very tangible cost. Our journey begins by drifting backward through time, letting 2 millennia spool away like fine silk thread. We travel eastward, over continents and oceans, until the familiar shapes of the modern world dissolve into a landscape of ancient empires. We are settling in the heart of Han Dynasty China in the year 50 BC. Our destination is Chang'an, the city of eternal peace, a magnificent metropolis that was, at that moment, the largest and most cosmopolitan city on Earth. Imagine, if you will, the sheer scale of this place. A vast, sprawling grid of avenues and alleyways, all enclosed within immense walls of rammed earth, so thick that a dozen horsemen could ride abreast along their tops. These walls were more than simple fortifications. They were a statement, a declaration of order and power that contained a world of over 1 million souls. The city was the eastern terminus of the Silk Road, the nexus point where the Han Empire met the rest of civilization. Through its 12 great gates poured a ceaseless river of humanity. Merchants from Parthia with their distinctive high hats, diplomats from the far western kingdoms, nomadic traders from the northern steppes with their herds of shaggy ponies, and scholars from every province of the vast empire. The air itself was a tapestry of sound and scent. The low rumble of iron-rimmed cartwheels on paved stone, the constant murmur of 100 different dialects, the sharp cry of a street vendor hawking sesame cakes, and the distant rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer. The smells were just as dense, the pungent aroma of fermented bean paste from a cook shop, the sweet, heavy scent of incense drifting from a temple doorway, the sharp smell of charcoal fires, and the earthy perfume of herbs and spices piled high in the market stalls. This was a world governed by a profound sense of order, structured by the intricate social hierarchies of Confucian thought. Duty, propriety, and above all, filial piety, the deep and unwavering respect for one's parents and ancestors, formed the bedrock of society. Yet, beneath this carefully constructed edifice of ritual and responsibility, there flowed a powerful undercurrent of mysticism, a deep fascination with the unseen world. The people of Han China lived in a cosmos teeming with spirits, ghosts, and demons. They consulted fortune-tellers before making important decisions, placed charms over their doors to ward off evil, and believed that the patterns of the stars held sway over their mortal lives. And woven into this spiritual fabric was a potent and seductive idea, the possibility of cheating death. The quest for longevity and even physical immortality was not some fringe belief held by a desperate few. It was a serious and expensive pursuit, one that had captivated even the most powerful of emperors. The great Emperor Wu, who had reigned a generation earlier, had famously poured immense resources into finding the fabled elixir of life, sending expeditions to find mythical islands, and employing legions of court alchemists known as the Fangxi. These men were masters of esoteric arts, claiming to know the secrets of transforming base metals into gold and of brewing potions that could grant eternal youth. It is into this world of pragmatic daily life and mystical yearning that we now turn. Our focus narrows, moving away from the grand imperial palaces and the sprawling markets, and into the quiet, respectable courtyard of a family home in one of the city's residential wards. Here lives a young man named Wei. His family is not of the nobility, nor are they poor. They belong to the artisan class, their hands and their loom providing a comfortable, if modest, existence. For generations, his family has been involved in the silk trade, not just as weavers of the lustrous fabric, but as dyers, creating the vibrant crimsons and indigos that were so highly prized along the trade routes. Wei is a man of his time, diligent, respectful, and deeply imbued with a sense of duty to his family. He understands the value of hard work, the careful accounting of every copper coin, and the importance of maintaining the family's good name. His life follows a predictable and comforting rhythm, dictated by the rising of the sun, the demands of the loom, and his obligations to his aging father. Wei's father, a man who had been a master weaver in his youth, is now entering the twilight of his years. His hands, once so nimble and sure among the threads, have grown stiff. His back aches, and a persistent cough now troubles his sleep. With the gradual decline of his physical strength has come a growing anxiety, a fear of the encroaching darkness. And it is this fear that has made him vulnerable. A few months ago, a man arrived in their district. He was not a local, but a traveling Fangxi, an alchemist who called himself the master of the azure cloud. He was a captivating figure, with a long, wispy beard, eyes that seemed to hold ancient secrets, and robes adorned with cryptic symbols. He did not shout his credentials in the marketplace. Instead, he cultivated an air of quiet, profound authority. He spoke not of simple cures, but of harmonizing the body's essential energies, of aligning oneself with the cosmic flow of the Tao, and of slowly, methodically turning back the relentless tide of age. To a man like Wei's father, who felt his own life force ebbing away, the master's words were like a soothing balm. He began to visit the alchemist, first out of curiosity, then with the earnest devotion of a true believer. And he began to spend money. At first it was a small sum, for a protective charm, a piece of polished jade inscribed with a celestial script. Then came the purchase of a small vial of a longevity elixir. The price was exorbitant, enough to feed the family for a month. The liquid within was a murky reddish brown, and to Wei's practical nose, it smelled suspiciously of little more than fermented plums and river water. But his father drank it with solemn reverence, declaring that he could feel a warmth spreading through his limbs, a newfound clarity in his mind. The purchases became more frequent and more expensive. There were cinnabar pills, tiny red pellets that the master claimed contained the crystallized essence of a dragon's breath. There were celestial dew drops to be collected on a specific type of leaf only during the pre-dawn mist. The family's savings, the product of decades of careful work and frugal living, began to dwindle at an alarming rate. Wei watched this with a growing sense of dread, trapped in the painful dilemma. His culture, his entire upbringing, demanded that he honor and obey his father without question. To challenge his father's judgment, especially on a matter he held so dear, would be a profound act of disrespect. Yet his own senses, his own rational mind, told him that his father was being systematically and skillfully deceived. He saw a charlatan preying on the fears of a good man, selling impossible dreams in exchange for hard-earned coin. It is from this place of quiet desperation and filial conflict that our first post tonight comes. A son seeking not to shame his father, but to find a way to save him from himself. Let's turn to a post from this worried son from Han Dynasty China.
The lamp is burning low. The house is quiet now. My father is asleep in his room, and I think he is dreaming of a long life. I can hear the soft rasp of his breathing through the paper wall. It is the same sound I have heard every night of my life, but lately it sounds more fragile, more precious. I should be sleeping too. The loom needs my attention at dawn. But my mind is a tangle of threads, and I cannot find the end of any of them. I sit here with the smell of my father's new medicine still in the air. It is a cloying, sweet smell, like old plums left in the sun with an undertone of damp earth. He drank it just before bed from a tiny porcelain cup that cost more than my best sandals. He smiled as he drank it. He said it made his bones feel young again. This man, this Feng Shi, calls himself the master of the azure cloud. He arrived in our quarter 2 months ago. He does not shout in the market like the men selling horse liniment. He's quiet. He has a small, clean room near the West Market gate, a room that always smells of strange incense. He speaks in a low voice, and he never seems to be in a hurry. When he looks at you, he does not really see you. His gaze is distant, as if he is listening to spirits whispering in his ear. He has a long, thin beard, but it is not the dignified white beard of a true scholar. It is yellowish at the tips. I saw him once in the market, buying cheap wine and millet cakes. He haggled over the price of the cakes. Then he went back to his room, and an hour later my father came home with a new prescription for a tonic that required the distilled essence of a 1,000-year-old mountain spring. The bottle cost 30 pieces of silver. The first thing my father bought was a charm, a small piece of polished stone. He said it was jade, but it felt warm and soft like soapstone. It was carved with a symbol the master said would absorb negative energy from the body. My father hung it by his bed. He said he slept more soundly. I did not say that the price of the stone was the same as a new shuttle for my loom, which I badly need. How could I? He was happy. He looked rested. A week later, he came home with the first vial of elixir. It was a dark, murky liquid. The master had told him it was made from herbs gathered on a sacred mountain, steeped in water from a hidden grotto. My father let me smell it. It smelled of wine and mud. I did not say this. I said, "It smells very potent, Father." He nodded, pleased. "It is the source of all energy," he said, his eyes shining with a light I have not seen in years.
Since then, it has been a constant stream of purchases. There are the cinnabar pills. They are tiny and bright red. The master says they contain the life force of the earth, the very same substance that gives emperors their power. I found one my father had dropped. I crushed it between my fingers. It turned to red dust, and it felt gritty, like clay mixed with sand. There is the celestial dew he must drink every morning. He places a special bronze leaf, also purchased from the master, outside his window at night. In the morning, he collects the few drops of moisture on it and drinks them with great ceremony. He says they purify his spirit. I say nothing, but I see it is just the morning dew, the same dew that is on every leaf, on every blade of grass in our courtyard. He paid for that bronze leaf with the money we had saved to rethatch the roof. The rains will come in 2 months. I do not know what we will do. The money is disappearing, like water poured onto dry earth. It is just gone. My father was a weaver his whole life. My grandfather was a weaver. We have always lived carefully. We have always known the value of a bolt of silk, how many days of work it represents, how much rice it will put in our bowls. My father taught me this. He taught me to count every coin, to bargain fairly but firmly, to waste nothing. And now he hands over sacks of coin for these hopes. He sold the great loom, the one my grandfather built. He said he no longer had the strength for it, which is true. But he told the buyer it was because he was entering a new phase of life, a spiritual phase, and that he had no more need for such worldly things. He gave half the money from the sale to the master for a private consultation on the art of circulating his breath. The master sat with him for an hour, told him to breathe in a certain way, and then left with a heavy purse. My father truly believes he is getting better. He stands straighter. He says the ache in his back is gone. He says his cough is a sign that the impurities are leaving his body. When I look at him, I see the same tired lines around his eyes. I see the same thinness in his arms. But his spirit is bright. He talks of the future, of the things he will do when his full strength returns. He talks of traveling to the southern mountains, of living to see his great-grandchildren. He is happier than he has been in a decade, and this is the knot I cannot untie.
Am I to be the one to tell him this happiness is a lie? That his new friend is a thief who smiles while he empties our grain jars? I tried to speak of it once. I did it carefully. I asked, "Father, this master, what province is he from? Do we know his family?" My father looked at me, and his smile faded. "He is a man of the spirit way. Such men have no province. The world is their home." I tried again. "The elixir he makes, the ingredients are very rare. Does he not worry about running out?" My father placed his hand on my shoulder. His hand is mostly bone now, the skin like dry paper. "Your concern is a credit to your filial heart," he said. "But you must not question things you do not understand. The master's knowledge is ancient. It is not for a young man who thinks only of threads and colors to comprehend. You must trust my judgment." And that was the end of it. He did not say it with anger. He said it with a quiet venality that closed the door between us. To press further would have been to call him a fool, to disrespect him in our own home. I could not do it. I bowed my head and said, "Yes, Father." I lie awake and I think of the master of the azure cloud. I picture him in his room, counting our coins. I wonder if he laughs. Or does he believe his own stories? Is he so lost in his own deceptions that he thinks his muddy water and red clay are actually magic? Sometimes I think that would be worse. A man who knows he is a liar is just a common thief. But a man who believes his own lies is a kind of poison. He infects everything he touches with his madness. He has infected my father. I see the family's future shrinking, the legacy of generations of hard work dissolving into tiny vials of scented water and dust. What will be left for my own children? What will be left to honor my father's spirit when he is gone? We will not even have the money for the proper funerary rites if this continues. The thought shames me, but it is the truth. So I sit here in the dark, the house groaning around me. I feel like a man watching his own house burn down, holding a bucket of water but forbidden to throw it. Every instinct tells me to run to the master's room, to grab him by his robes and expose him as a fraud in the street. But I see my father's face. I see his hopeful eyes. I see the brief peace he has found. And my hands are tied. I am bound by my love for him, by the duty that he himself taught me. How do I protect him from a thief who sells him his own happiness? How do I honor my father while also saving him from this slow, quiet ruin? What can a son do? And there, in the quiet lamplight of a humble home in ancient Chang'an, Wei's question hangs in the air, a testament to a struggle that is both deeply personal and profoundly universal. His dilemma is a perfect, painful knot. To save his father's legacy, he feels he must betray his father's trust. To honor the man, he must stand by and watch the fruits of a lifetime of labor be traded for dust and dreams. The tragedy of Wei's situation is that the alchemist's true power lay not in his murky potions, but in his understanding of the human heart. He was not merely selling a product, he was selling a narrative, a story of hope to a man who felt his own story was coming to an end. The father's belief, his insistence that he felt younger and stronger, was not necessarily a sign of foolishness, but a powerful demonstration of the mind's ability to manifest what the heart so desperately wants to be true. He was a willing participant in his own deception, because the alternative, the acceptance of his own mortality, was too bleak to contemplate. Wei's struggle is compounded by the very virtues his society held most dear. His filial piety, his deep-seated respect for his elder, became the cage that held him captive. The alchemist did not need to silence the sun, the culture did it for him. This is the subtle genius of so many successful deceptions throughout history. They don't just exploit our greed or our ignorance, they exploit our goodness. They use our sense of duty, our trust, and our love as leverage against us. We do not know the end of Wei's story. History does not record the fate of one weaver's family, their savings, or their roof. Perhaps Wei found a clever, gentle way to expose the fraud without shaming his father. Perhaps a neighbor intervened, or the master of the azure cloud, having drained this well dry, simply vanished into the crowded streets of the city to find his next client. Or, perhaps, as so often happened, the family's resources were simply exhausted, leaving the father with nothing but his failing health and the bitter taste of a shattered hope. The quiet anxiety of this one son in Han China reminds us that the struggle against deceit is not always a grand battle of wits. Often it is a silent internal conflict waged in the heart of a family. The hope for a longer life is a powerful currency, one that has been minted and spent in every culture across the ages. But it is not the only intangible hope that can be so easily exploited. Sometimes the desire is not for more time in this world, but for a better place in the next. Now, let us allow the centuries to drift forward, leaving the silk-paved avenues of Chang'an behind. We travel west, across the vast plains of Asia, and into the heart of a very different world, a world where faith is the measure of all things. Our journey continues, drifting forward now, carried on the currents of time for more than 1,400 years. We leave the memory of Chang'an's precise grid and its earth-rammed walls far behind. The landscape transforms. The vast, organized empire of the Han gives way to a smaller, greener, and more fractured world. We find ourselves in the late 14th century, in the Kingdom of England. The year is 1390. This is the age of Chaucer, of the Black Prince, and of a society grappling with the aftershocks of plague and rebellion. The unifying principle of this world is not a distant emperor or a complex bureaucracy, but the singular, all-encompassing power of the Christian faith. Life here is viewed not as a single existence to be prolonged, but as a brief and difficult trial, a spiritual pilgrimage with an eternal destination, heaven or hell. And for those who were not saints but not grievous sinners, there was the terrifying waiting room of purgatory, where the soul must be purified by fire before it could enter paradise. This belief shaped every aspect of daily life, from the grandest cathedral to the humblest peasant's hut. Imagine yourself now, not in a bustling city, but on a muddy, rutted track,
winding its way through the green countryside of Kent. It is late spring. The air is cool and damp, thick with the scent of wet earth, wild garlic, and the sweet perfume of hawthorn blossoms. The woods on either side of the road are dense and dark, and travelers eye them with a certain apprehension, for tales of outlaws and bandits are common. The sounds are the simple ones of a pre-industrial age, the gentle lowing of cattle in a distant field, the cheerful chorus of birdsong, and the rhythmic plodding of horses' hooves, and the constant weary creak of wooden cartwheels sinking into the mud. This is the road to Canterbury, and it is alive with people. A pilgrimage is one of the few great adventures available to an ordinary person in this era. It is a journey of profound spiritual significance, an act of devotion undertaken to seek a miracle, to atone for sins, or to fulfill a sacred vow. It is also a social phenomenon, a great river of humanity flowing towards a single sacred point. On this road, all classes of society are mixed together. A solemn knight, his armor carefully oiled, rides alongside a wealthy merchant who complains about the road. A group of cheerful nuns, their laughter like little bells, share the path with a sober university clerk, his nose buried in a book. And all around them are the common folk, traveling in groups for safety, their worldly possessions bundled on their backs. Their destination is Canterbury Cathedral, home to the shrine of St. Thomas Becket. The Archbishop, murdered in his own cathedral more than 2 centuries earlier, was now the most powerful saint in England. His tomb was said to be the site of countless miracles. The sick were made well, the lame could walk, and the blind could see. But more importantly, in an age so concerned with the afterlife, a prayer at his shrine was believed to shorten one's time in the fires of purgatory. This potent promise was the magnet that drew these pilgrims, step by weary step, towards the holy city. This deep and pervasive faith created its own economy. The church was not just a spiritual guide, it was a vast, wealthy institution, and salvation had, in many ways, become a commodity.
Licensed pardoners traveled the country, selling official paper indulgences from the Pope, which promised forgiveness for sins in exchange for a donation. And with them came the even more tangible trade in holy relics. A true relic, a piece of a saint's bone, a scrap of their clothing, a splinter from the true cross, was believed to be a physical conduit to heaven. To touch or kiss such an object was to come into direct contact with the divine. The demand for these sacred items was immense, and where there is great demand, a market for forgeries will inevitably flourish. Enterprising pardoners and relic mongers, some licensed, many not, crisscrossed the country with bags full of holy artifacts, ready to sell a moment of divine connection to the faithful. It is among this hopeful, weary crowd that we find our second voice tonight. Her name is Eleanor. She is not a woman of wealth or status. She is a peasant from a small village many days' travel from here. Her life is a cycle of hard, physical labor, governed by the planting and the harvest. Her hands are chapped and rough from field work and housework, her face weathered by the sun and wind. She wears a simple dress of coarse brown wool, and her most valuable possession is tucked deep within a small leather pouch tied to her belt, a handful of coins, including 1 precious silver penny, saved over many months. This journey is the single greatest undertaking of her life. She is not traveling for adventure. She walks this road with a heavy but hopeful heart, praying for the soul of her husband, who was taken by the sweating sickness the year before. She is a woman of simple and absolute faith. She believes in the goodness of God, the power of the saints, and the authority of the Church without question. For her, the world is exactly as the village priest has described it. As she travels, she is swept up in the collective spirit of the pilgrimage. She shares her meager bread with a fellow traveler, listens to a friar tell a saint's tale, and joins in the singing of hymns as the company trudges through the mud. One afternoon, near a small roadside cross, they come upon a pardoner. He has set up a small folding table on which he has laid out his wares on a piece of clean linen. He is a man with a loud, confident voice and a persuasive smile. He speaks to the crowd of the dangers of purgatory, of the torments that await the unshriven soul. And then he presents his treasures. He holds up a small polished stone he claims is from the site of St. Stephen's martyrdom. He displays a feather, he says, from the wing of the Archangel Gabriel. And finally, with great theatrical reverence, he opens a small carved wooden box. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, lies a small, yellowed piece of bone. The finger of St. Cuthbert, he proclaims, a holy relic of the great northern saint, who performed miracles even in death. For the price of just 1 silver penny, you may kiss this holy bone and have 200 years taken from your time in purgatory. A wave of awe passes through the crowd. Eleanor, her heart pounding, thinks of her husband, of her own sins, of the terrifying fires of purification. 200 years. It is a gift beyond imagining. It is from this moment of profound, simple faith that our next post emerges, written in the aftermath of a transaction that felt at the time like a brush with heaven itself. Let's turn to a post from this devout pilgrim on the road to Canterbury.
The straw in this inn's loft is damp, and it smells of sour ale and wet dogs. Down below, the men are still singing, but their voices are thick and ugly now. I have pulled my cloak up to my chin, but I am not cold. I am hot. A hot, sick feeling that has been sitting in my stomach like a stone for hours. I should be praying. Every night on this journey I have said my prayers for John's soul and for my own, but tonight the words feel like ash in my mouth. My silver penny is gone. I spent it today, and I thought I had spent it well. I thought I had bought a piece of grace. Now I feel like the biggest fool in all of Christendom. It happened this afternoon. The sun was almost warm, and the mud on the road had begun to dry. We were a company of about 20, walking together since the last village. A man on a fine horse told a story about a dragon, and we were all in good spirits. Then we saw him. He was standing by an old stone cross where 2 roads met. A pardoner. He was a clean man. His robes were not frayed, and his hands did not have the grime of the road on them. He had a sweet, strong voice that carried. He spoke to us of our souls. He painted pictures with his words, pictures of the fires of purgatory, so hot they could melt iron. He spoke of the long, lonely years a soul must wait there, burning away its sins. I thought of John, taken so fast by the sweat. Did he have time to confess all? My heart grew cold with fear. I clutched the little leather pouch at my belt where my coins were. Then, after he had filled us all with a holy terror, he showed us his comfort, his treasures. He had a piece of wood. He said it was from the boat of St. Peter. He had a scrap of cloth from St. Veronica's veil. And then he He brought out the special relic. He made us all lean closer. He opened a small box carved with saints, and inside, on a bit of red cloth, was a bone. It was yellow with age and about the length of my thumb. "The very finger bone of the blessed Saint Cuthbert," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. We all gasped. "Saint Cuthbert, a great English saint, a protector." The pardoner said that a single kiss with a true heart and a donation of 1 silver penny would grant 200 years of indulgence. 200 years! A lifetime! More than a lifetime! I looked at the bone, and it seemed to glow. The whole world went quiet, except for the beating of my own heart. I thought of John. I thought of my own small sins, the angry words, the moments of envy. I could wash them away.
My fingers trembled as I worked the knot on my pouch. The silver penny was my last one. I had been saving it for a special candle at the shrine in Canterbury, but this felt more important. This was a miracle, right here on the road. I felt the coin, cool and heavy in my palm. I stepped forward. Others were pushing behind me, all eager. I held out the penny, and the pardoner took it with a neat little dip of his fingers. His nails were clean, I remember that. Then he held the box for me. I bowed my head and pressed my lips to the bone. It was cold and smooth. It felt like a sacred thing. When I stepped back, I felt dizzy and light. I felt clean. I had done a good thing. I had helped John. I had helped myself. The rest of the afternoon I walked on air. The road seemed less muddy, my pack felt less heavy. We came to this inn at dusk. It is a noisy, crowded place. I bought a piece of bread and a cup of water and found a spot in the common room, away from the drunks. I wanted to keep my feeling of holiness safe. I was watching the fire, thinking about the kindness of St. Cuthbert, when I saw him, the pardoner. He was sitting at a big table with a pig-faced man who looked like a wool merchant. They were eating roasted chicken, tearing it apart with their greasy fingers. The pardoner was laughing, a loud, ugly laugh, nothing like the sweet, holy voice he had used on the road. It was strange to see him so. I tried not to look, but my eyes kept being drawn back to him. He finished his chicken, wiped his mouth on his sleeve, and then he leaned close to his friend, as if to show him something secret. He pulled out the little carved box, the one with the bone. I saw it clearly. The merchant grunted, impressed. Then the pardoner laughed again and reached into the big leather bag at his feet, and he pulled out another box, a second box, exactly the same as the first. He opened it, and there on a scrap of red cloth was another finger bone, another yellowed thumb-sized finger bone of St. Cuthbert.
For a moment, my mind was just empty. I stared. 2 of them. They looked the same, like 2 dried twigs from the same branch. My first thought, and God forgive my foolishness, was, did St. Cuthbert have more fingers than other men? The thought was so stupid that it almost made me laugh. And then, like a bucket of icy water dumped over my head, the truth hit me. It was a cold, sickening splash. They were fake. Both of them. All of them. The feeling of grace, the lightness, it all vanished. And in its place, a hot shame rose up my neck and filled my face. I felt every eye in the room was on me, that everyone knew what a simple-minded fool I was. I had traded my precious silver penny, my Canterbury candle, for a kiss on a pig's knuckle or a sheep's bone. The coin. I can feel the ghost of its weight in my palm. That penny was a week's worth of eggs. It was a new ribbon for my hair. It was half a day's wages for a laborer in the fields. It was a great sum of money to me, and I gave it to that man, with his clean fingernails and his lying tongue.
He's probably sleeping in a soft bed right now, his belly full of chicken and ale on my money, on the money of all the other poor fools in my group. The shame is so thick, I could barely breathe. I have been a fool, a trusting, stupid fool. But it is more than the money. It is the prayer. When I kissed that bone, my heart was full of love for John and full of faith in God's mercy. Was that a lie too? If the bone is not real, is the indulgence not real? Is John's soul no better off than it was yesterday? Did I just whisper my most secret hopes to a sheep bone in a box? That is what hurts the most. It feels like a theft of something more than silver. He took my hope and sold it back to me. He used the name of a holy saint, the fear of God, to pick my pocket. I feel dirty. Not clean, like I did this afternoon. I feel dirty and small. I look at the other pilgrims sleeping around me in the straw. The old man with a bad cough, the young woman who prays for a child. Did they buy a kiss too? Are their hearts as heavy as mine tonight? I want to get up and leave, to walk all night so I never have to see that pardoner's face again. But I am just a woman, and the road is dark. All I can do is lie here in the smelly straw and try not to weep. I gave him my silver penny. But what did he truly take from me?
Eleanor's quiet shame in that smoky tavern loft is a feeling that echoes through her era, a small personal testament to a widespread and deeply cynical trade. The pardoner, with his bag of duplicate bones, was not an anomaly. He was a business model. For every true relic, carefully preserved in a great cathedral, there were thousands of forgeries circulating on the roads and in the marketplaces of Europe. Pigs' bones were passed off as the fingers of apostles. Splinters from any common workbench were sold as pieces of the true cross. And vials of ordinary water were venerated as the tears of a martyred saint. This industry of deceit was so common that it was openly criticized by theologians and satirized by poets like Chaucer. Yet it continued to thrive. It persisted because it was built upon the most powerful and vulnerable of human emotions, the fear of damnation and the desperate hope for grace. The pardoner's art was not in carving bone, but in manipulating belief. He understood that you must first make the customer feel the chill of the abyss before you can sell them a blanket. For Eleanor, the loss of the silver penny, as significant as it was for a woman of her means, was the shallowest part of the wound. The true theft was of something far more precious. Her simple, unquestioning faith was the lens through which she viewed the entire world. It gave meaning to her suffering and order to the universe. The fake relic cracked that lens. It introduced a sliver of doubt not just into the honesty of one man, but into the tangible connection between her world and the divine. The transaction in the tavern corner didn't just expose a fraud. It threatened to sever her line to God, to render her prayers inert, and to make her feel utterly alone in a cosmos she had believed was watching over her. We don't know if Eleanor ever recovered from that quiet moment of disillusionment. Perhaps she reached Canterbury, and in the magnificent vaulted space of the cathedral found her faith restored. Or perhaps that seed of cynicism took root, a small, bitter kernel of knowledge that the world was not as it seemed. The deception Eleanor faced was nested within a stable, if sometimes corrupt, belief. The value of God, saints, and salvation was a given. But what happens when the entire system collapses?
What happens when it is not just a single relic that is revealed to be a fraud, but the very foundations of society, its laws, its rulers, and even the paper that people call money? Let us now move forward again, 400 years into the future. We leave the muddy lanes of medieval England and plunge into the heart of a maelstrom, a moment of violent, revolutionary change. Our next story comes from a city where the old certainties have been torn down, and in the chaotic space left behind, new and audacious forms of deception are taking root.
We travel forward once more, leaving the medieval pilgrim and her simple, devastating discovery behind. 4 centuries pass in a moment, and the world we enter is one of violent, accelerated change. The slow, rhythmic life of faith and farming has given way to the frantic, feverish pulse of revolution. We arrive in Paris in the late summer of 1792. This is not a city in a state of simple unrest. It is a crucible where an entire nation is being melted down and recast. The ancient monarchy, which had ruled for 1,000 years, has been overthrown. The king and his family are prisoners, their faces already beginning to fade from the coins and emblems of the state. A new, fragile republic has been declared, but its survival is far from certain. The air itself is electric with a volatile mixture of ecstatic hope and profound dread. Imagine the streets of Paris in this moment. They are a stage for a grand and terrifying drama. The soundscape is a constant low thrum of anxiety and fervor. The deep, resonant toll of the tocsin, the city's alarm bells, rings out at all hours, signaling a new political crisis, a fresh rumor of foreign invasion, or the gathering of a mob. The air carries the sound of impassioned speeches from street corner orators, the rousing, defiant chorus of La Marseillaise sung by columns of soldiers marching to the front, and the nervous murmur of citizens gathered in endless queues. The sights are just as potent. The vibrant tricolor cockade, blue, white, and red, is pinned to every hat and lapel, a mandatory symbol of loyalty to the new order. Decrees from the revolutionary government are plastered over the old carved stone walls of buildings, their fresh ink covering the faint outlines of royal insignia. The city is a palimpsest, with the new raw language of revolution written hastily over the elegant script of the old regime. And everywhere there is the grim, watchful presence of the National Guard, their bayonets a constant reminder that this new liberty is armed and suspicious. In this cauldron of political upheaval, the very idea of money has become unstable, treacherous. The revolutionary government, having inherited a bankrupt state, had taken a radical step. It seized the vast lands and properties of the Catholic Church, declaring them the property of the nation. To turn this immense asset into cash, they began to issue paper money, called the assignat. Each note was, in theory, a bond, a share in the value of these confiscated lands. It was a clever idea, but one born of desperation. To pay for wars against half of Europe and to manage the daily costs of a nation in turmoil, the government printed more, and then still more, until the amount of paper money in circulation vastly outstripped the value of the land it supposedly represented. The result was a catastrophic, spiraling inflation. The value of the assignat collapsed. A note that could buy a loaf of bread in the morning might only buy half a loaf by evening. Different series of notes were issued, with some older ones being suddenly declared worthless. Forgeries were rampant. For the ordinary shopkeeper, the artisan, the worker, this turned every single transaction into a gamble.
A lifetime of savings held in a stack of these paper notes could be rendered meaningless by a government decree issued overnight. This economic chaos was a paradise for swindlers, for those who knew how to stay one step ahead of the news, how to pass off worthless paper to the unsuspecting.
Our focus now narrows to one of the most essential and fraught locations in the entire city. A small bakery, a boulangerie, on a side street in the heart of Paris. Here we find a man named Antoine. He is a baker. He is not a politician, a philosopher, or a soldier. He is a man of substance, of tangible things. His world is one of flour, water, salt, and yeast. His days begin in the dark hours before dawn, his life measured by the slow, patient rhythm of dough rising and the intense, searing heat of his wood-fired oven. His work is essential. Bread in Paris was never just a foodstuff. It was the bedrock of life, and its price and availability were matters of political dynamite. The long, anxious queues that formed outside his shop each morning were a barometer of the city's mood. Antoine's bakery, with its warm, comforting smell of fresh bread, and its surfaces perpetually dusted with a fine white coat of flour, is a small island of life-giving order in an ocean of uncertainty. He is a practical man, trying to navigate the storm, to keep his business running, to feed his own family, and to do his duty to his neighbors by providing their daily bread. On this particular day, the tension in the city is high. The queues have been long and fretful since dawn. Antoine is exhausted, his arms aching from kneading dough, his face slick with sweat from the heat of the oven. Much of his stock for the day is gone. It is late afternoon when a man enters his shop. He is not one of the usual neighborhood wives or workers. He is well dressed in a clean coat, and he speaks with an air of authority and confidence. He says he is an agent for one of the local political clubs, and he needs bread for their evening meeting. He wants to buy everything Antoine has left, 50 loaves. This is a huge sale, a windfall. Antoine is hesitant, but the man is persuasive. He talks of patriotism, of the need to feed the defenders of the Republic, and then he solves the problem of payment. He reaches into his coat and produces a thick, clean stack of assignats. To Antoine, who is used to dealing with crumpled, filthy, low-denomination notes and a handful of small, worn coins, this stack of crisp paper looks like a fortune. It represents security. It means he can afford a new sack of flour, a cord of wood for his oven, perhaps even a small piece of meat for his family's supper. The transaction is made quickly. The man's associates carry out the bread, and he is gone, leaving Antoine alone in his suddenly empty, quiet shop. The air still smells of the bread he just sold. He holds the stack of notes in his flour-dusted hands. They feel clean, substantial. It is from this fleeting moment of relief, of a hard day's work seemingly rewarded, that our next account is born. Let us now read a post from this Parisian baker in the moments after a sale that seemed too good to be true.
I'm sitting alone in my shop. It's strange to see it so quiet at this hour. The shelves are completely bare. The air no longer smells of bread, it just smells of old wood and the faint dust of yesterday's flour.
My arms ache. It is the deep ache I feel at the end of every day, the ache of lifting sacks of flour, of kneading dough for hours, of pulling heavy paddles from the hot mouth of the oven. Usually, it is a good ache. It is the feeling of work done, of a duty fulfilled. Tonight, it just feels like pain, a useless pain. On the table in front of me is a stack of paper. It is neat and clean. The ink is a sharp, clear black. An hour ago, this stack of paper felt like a blessing. It felt heavy. It felt like hope. Now it feels like a pile of dead leaves. He came in when the last of the afternoon light was hitting the street outside. A man I had never seen before. He had a clean coat, and his shoes were not caked in mud. He spoke well. He called me Citizen Baker. He said he was from the Society of Patriots, and that they needed bread for their meeting tonight. He spoke of the fatherland in danger, of the need for all good citizens to do their part. His words made me feel important. Me, Antoine, a simple baker, helping the men who were shaping the new France. He wanted all I had left, 50 loaves. My beautiful round country loaves with the thick, dark crusts that crackle when you press them. I had been proud of them this morning. I watched my wife, Marie, wrap them for his men. Each loaf felt like a child I had raised. When it came time to pay, he did not haggle. He did not pull out a fistful of dirty, small-value notes and worn-out coins like my usual customers. He produced this stack, assignats, a whole sheaf of them. They were so crisp. I had never held so many new notes. I have become an expert in old paper, in notes that are torn and stained and soft from being passed through 1,000 greasy hands. These were different. They felt real. They felt official. For a moment, I let myself believe that things were getting better, that the government was finally making money that was worth something. He paid me the full price, without a blink. I thanked him. I felt like a good patriot. He smiled and said it was I who was the patriot, feeding the revolution. Then he and his men were gone, and I was left with my empty shelves and this beautiful stack of paper. I thought of Marie. I would surprise her. I would buy a small piece of pork for our dinner. I would have enough to pay the wood seller for a whole month. I felt a warmth in my chest, a feeling of safety. That feeling lasted for 10 minutes. Then Jean-Paul, the butcher from next door, stuck his head in. He saw my empty shelves and grinned. "Good day for you, Antoine," he asked. I grinned back. I felt proud. "A very good day," I said, and I held up my stack of paper for him to see. A patriot from one of the clubs bought all of it. Jean-Paul's smile vanished. He stepped inside, and a cold draft followed him in. "Let me see one of those," he said. His voice was quiet. I handed him a note. My hand was steady. I was not worried. Jean-Paul is a good neighbor, but he is a worrier. He held the note up to the fading light coming through my dusty window. He turned it over. He rubbed the paper between his thick thumb and forefinger.
"Antoine," he said, and he would not look me in the eye. He looked at the floor. "Where have you been all day? In your oven? Did you not hear the crier this morning? Or see the new decree?" I felt a prickle of sweat on my neck. "I have been working, Jean-Paul. I do not have time for gossip and decrees. What is it?" He finally looked at me, and his face was full of pity. And that was when my stomach turned to ice. "This series," he said, tapping the note. "The government issued a new printing. These old ones from before the summer, they are worthless now. They declared them void yesterday. You cannot even pay your taxes with them. They are paper, Antoine. Just paper." No. I told him no. He was wrong. The man was a patriot. The notes were new. They were crisp. They could not be worthless.
I argued. I told him he had misunderstood. For every reason I gave, he had a sad shake of his head. He reached into his own apron and pulled out a greasy, folded newspaper. He pointed to a small column of print with his bloody finger. The words swam in front of my eyes, but I saw them. The series marked with the face of the late king will no longer be considered legal tender. The notes on my table all had the face of the late king. I sat down heavily on my flour sack. I did not realize my legs had given up. The stack of paper was still in my hand. It suddenly felt light, flimsy, disgusting. The confident, well-dressed man was not a patriot. He was a thief, a rat. He knew. He must have known. He came looking for a fool who had been too busy working to listen to the news, and he found me. 50 loaves. That is 2 sacks of flour. That is a whole day of burning my precious firewood. That is the profit I needed to live for a week. It is all gone. Given away for a speech about the fatherland and a pile of useless paper. The man's face is burned into my mind now. His confident smile, his easy words. He used the revolution as a costume. He used my own hope for a better France to rob me. The betrayal feels worse than the loss of the money. He made me feel like a partner in his crime. He made me feel proud to be his victim. I look at my hands. They are covered in dried dough and flour, the signs of my honest work, and they feel empty. I think of the queue that will be here tomorrow morning, the old widow, Madame Dubois, the young mother with 3 children. They will come for their bread, and I will have nothing to sell them. I have no money to buy flour tonight. I have nothing. My whole day is gone. My whole day for nothing. The ache in my arms feels different now. It is the ache of a fool. What will I tell Marie? What will we eat tonight? I just sit here in my dark, empty shop, and I look at this pile of lies on my table.
Antoine's quiet devastation in his empty shop is a portrait of a specific kind of historical trauma, the kind felt by ordinary people when the very ground of their reality shifts beneath them. The tragedy of the assignat was not just economic, it was psychological. It took the concept of value, something a baker like Antoine understood in the tangible terms of flour and fire, and turned it into an abstraction, a cruel joke printed on flimsy paper. The man who cheated him was a predator, perfectly adapted to this new, chaotic environment. His true genius lay not just in his knowledge of worthless currency, but in his masterful use of revolutionary language. By cloaking his simple greed in the grand, fashionable rhetoric of patriotism, he disarmed his victim completely. He transformed a selfish act into what felt for a moment like a shared noble cause. This perversion of ideology is a common feature of turbulent times. When old symbols of authority are torn down, new ones are easily co-opted by those who see the chaos not as a moment of liberation, but as an opportunity for theft. Antoine's story was one of millions. The hyperinflation of the revolutionary period was a financial storm that wrecked the lives of countless artisans, shopkeepers, and workers, the very people the revolution was supposed to champion. It was a slow-motion disaster that proved to be just as destructive as the guillotine, wiping out futures and erasing the security of generations in a flurry of worthless paper. It is a stark reminder that the grand narratives of history, of revolutions and republics, are always built upon a foundation of small personal economies. When that foundation cracks,
As it did for Antoine, the entire structure is threatened. We do not know what became of him, whether he managed to borrow enough to buy flour for the next day, or if his small bakery became another casualty of the times, its oven growing cold forever. His story is that of the unrecorded casualty, the man who is not killed by a bullet, but by a lie printed on a piece of paper. The chaos of a dying society creates fertile ground for deceit, but a different kind of chaos and a different kind of hope can be found at the very frontiers of the known world, where society is not yet fully formed. It is a place where the dream is not simply to survive another day, but to change one's entire existence overnight with a single lucky discovery. Let us travel for the last time tonight, moving forward a century and across an ocean. We leave the politically charged streets of Paris and journey to the cold, wild, and unforgiving north, to a place where the promise of gold has driven thousands of men mad with hope.
Our final journey takes us forward one last century and deep into the heart of the North American continent. We leave the old world with its ancient cities and its complex, decaying societies far behind. We are bound for a place where history is yet to be written, a raw, untamed wilderness where the rules are few and the promises are immense. Our destination is the Yukon Territory of northwestern Canada in the frigid, frantic year of 1897. This is the height of the Klondike Gold Rush, one of the last and greatest stampedes for wealth in modern history. A year earlier, gold had been discovered in stunning quantities on a small tributary of the Klondike River. When news of this strike, carried by the first steamships of the season, reached the outside world, it ignited a global fever. In the cities of Seattle, San Francisco, and beyond, headlines screamed of mountains of gold, of poor men becoming millionaires overnight. The story took hold of the popular imagination, and 100,000 people from every walk of life abandoned their homes, their jobs, and their families to chase this northern dream. The dream was of gold. The reality was of unimaginable hardship. The journey to the Klondike was a brutal crucible, designed, it seemed, to break a man before he even had a chance to swing a pickaxe. Prospectors sailed north on dangerously overcrowded ships to the Alaskan port towns of Skagway and Dyea. From there, they faced the true ordeal, the infamous Chilkoot or White Pass trails. Each man was required by the Canadian Mounties to haul a literal ton of supplies, enough to survive 1 year in the harsh northern climate. This meant carrying immense loads up treacherous, icy mountain slopes, a soul-crushing process of moving a few packs forward, then hiking back down to retrieve the next, repeating the cycle for weeks on end. Those who survived the passes then had to build a rudimentary boat and navigate 500 miles of dangerous lakes and rapids down the Yukon River to reach their final destination. This journey was a filter, weeding out the weak, the unprepared, and the unlucky. But for those who made it, it also instilled a desperate need for the gamble to have been worth it. At the end of this pilgrimage of suffering lay Dawson City, a chaotic boomtown that had exploded from a quiet moose pasture into a sprawling settlement of 30,000 people in less than 2 years. It was a city built of raw timber and raw hope, clinging to a strip of muddy permafrost at the confluence of the Yukon and Klondike rivers. Imagine a single wide street,
a river of mud churned by the boots of thousands of men. This street was lined with a chaotic jumble of log cabins, canvas tents, and false-fronted buildings housing saloons, gambling palaces, supply outfitters, and assay offices. The air, thin and cold, hummed with a constant frantic energy. The sounds were a ceaseless mix of saloon pianos, tinkling day and night, the boisterous shouts of drunken miners, the rhythmic clang of blacksmiths' hammers, and the low murmur of deals being made and rumors being spread. This was a world almost entirely without women, a place of intense loneliness and fierce competition, populated by two distinct classes: the hardened sourdoughs, veterans of the North who had gotten in early, and the chichacos, the tenderfeet, the newcomers, who had just stumbled off the trail, their eyes wide with a mixture of exhaustion and gold fever.
By the time the great wave of stampeders arrived in 1897, a harsh truth was already settling in. They were too late. Nearly every inch of promising ground along the famous gold-bearing creeks, Bonanza, El Dorado, Hunker, had already been staked. The dream that had been sold to them in the newspapers was, for most, already an illusion. This reality created a new kind of market. Since there was no more gold to be found in the ground, the most profitable commodity became the hope of gold itself. And this gave rise to one of the most classic and cruel cons of the frontier: salting a claim. The method was simple. A man who owned a worthless piece of frozen gravel would take his shotgun and replace the standard lead pellets with gold dust. He would then wander out to his claim and fire both barrels into a patch of dirt or the wall of a shallow mine shaft. The gold would embed itself in the ground, peppering it with just enough color to fool a desperate eye. The con man would then find his mark, almost always a chichaco, fresh off the trail and dizzy with ambition, and bring him out to the property. He would offer to show him how to pan for gold, guiding him to the exact spot he had just salted. When the pan, swirled with the icy creek water, came up glittering with gold, the effect on the newcomer was electric. Here at last was proof that his journey, his suffering, his gamble had all been worth it. It is into this scene that our final narrator for tonight arrives. We do not know his name. We know him only by the label he would have been given: a chichaco. He is a young man, perhaps from a clerk's desk in Seattle. He is tired to the bone, his body still aching from the Chilkoot Pass, his spirit overwhelmed by the raw, chaotic energy of Dawson. He has sold everything he owned to get here, and his entire future rests on what he can find in this cold, indifferent ground. He is the perfect victim, primed by desperation and consumed by hope. He has just concluded a transaction in a noisy saloon, handing over the last of his money to a friendly, weathered-looking sourdough for the deed to a small patch of land just outside of town. It is from this pinnacle of hope, this moment right before the truth begins to dawn, that we hear our final post. Let's turn to this post from a hopeful newcomer in the Klondike, standing for the first time on land he believes will make him a rich man.
The deed is in my pocket. My pocket. The paper feels warm against my leg. I am a landowner. A Klondike landowner. I am standing on my own claim. My claim. The air is so cold it hurts to breathe, but I don't care. It feels like the cleanest air I have ever tasted. I look at the spruce trees, their branches heavy with a dusting of early snow. They are my trees. I look at the creek, running dark and fast over the rocks. It is my creek.
The sound it makes is no longer just water over stone. It is the sound of my future. It is the sound of gold. I think of Mr. Abernathy's stuffy office back in Seattle, the endless columns of numbers, the smell of dust and stale coffee. I feel like I could shout, and the sound would carry all the way back there. I am never going back. I am a king of mud and rocks and glorious, glorious possibility. I only arrived in Dawson 3 days ago. My body still aches from the trail. I still wake up in the night feeling like I am falling off the side of that terrible mountain pass. The town is a madhouse, full of loud, rough men. I was lost, I admit it. I walked into a saloon called the Aurora, just to get warm, and I felt like a child in the land of giants. And then I met him, an old man sitting alone at a corner table. His face was a map of wrinkles, and his beard was stained with tobacco, but his eyes were kind. He saw me looking lost and waved me over. His name was Jedediah. He bought me a whiskey that burned all the way down to my toes. He asked me my story, and he listened. He really listened. He nodded as I talked, a sad, knowing look in his eyes. When I was done, he sighed a big, weary sigh. "Son," he said, "this place will eat a young man like you alive if you're not careful." He told me he'd been here since the start. He had a claim on a little creek just off the main river, a good claim, but his back was giving out. The digging, the endless bending over in the cold water, it was too much for an old man. He said he was thinking of selling, going back south to find some sun before he died. He didn't want to sell to one of the big mining syndicates. He said they were vultures. He wanted his claim to go to a young fellow with grit, someone who deserved a chance. He looked me right in the eye. "You look like a man who deserves a chance," he said. My heart was hammering in my chest. We left the saloon and walked a mile out of town. He showed me the claim. It wasn't much to look at, just a bend in the creek with a muddy bank. "She don't look like much," Jedediah said, "but the beauty is underneath." He showed me how to use a gold pan. He scooped some dirt from a spot right by the water's edge. He showed me how to swirl it to let the water carry away the lighter mud and sand. My hands were clumsy, but he was patient. Then he let me take over. He pointed to a spot. "Try right there," he said. I scooped up the dirt. My hands were shaking as I swirled the pan. The gray mud washed away, then the black sand, and then I stopped breathing. The bottom of the pan, it wasn't black anymore. It was yellow, a beautiful, shining, brilliant yellow. It was covered in tiny flakes of gold, and nestled amongst them were 3 small nuggets, each the size of a pea. I don't remember much after that. It was like a dream. The world went blurry. All I could see was the gold in the pan. Real gold. My gold. Jedediah clapped me on the back. "Told you, son, she's ready to pay." We practically ran back to Dawson. We went to the gold commissioner's office. I didn't even question the price. I reached into my money belt and pulled out every last dollar I had. The entire sum of my old life, the sale of my parents' house, my own savings, everything. I gave it to him without a second thought. It felt like the smartest decision I had ever made. He signed the deed over to me. He shook my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "Good luck to you, son," he said. And then he was gone, lost in the crowded, muddy street. I stood there for a minute, just holding the deed, feeling like the luckiest man in the world. That was this morning. I spent the last of my coins on a new pickaxe and shovel and came right back out here, to my claim. For the first hour, I was singing. I attacked the ground with my pickaxe, the frozen earth jarring my arms with every strike. I didn't care. Every shovelful of dirt
felt like a shovel full of gold. After I had a good pile, I took my pan down to the creek. I was careful, just like Jedediah had showed me. I swirled the pan, the mud washed away, then the black sand. I held my breath, and there at the bottom was nothing. Just rocks. Gray, worthless rocks.
The thought is so quiet, but so loud. Jedediah, his kind eyes, his story, his disappearing act, it was all a lie. I sit here now by the creek. My hands are raw and bleeding. I am covered in mud. The deed in my pocket feels cold now, like a stone. All my money is gone. Everything. The whole world feels silent. I am thousands of miles from anyone who knows my name. The winter is coming. I have no money, no food, and a worthless piece of frozen land. The long, hard journey to get here, all the pain and the sweat on the pass, it was all for this. To be made a fool of in a single afternoon. To buy a lie. I don't feel angry. I just feel empty. The sun is gone. It is getting dark. And I am so cold. What do I do now? I told myself not to worry. It was my first try. I was probably doing it wrong. I tried again. Nothing. And again. Nothing. I moved to a different spot, a few feet away from where Jedediah had shown me. I dug for another hour. My hands started to blister. My back began to scream. I panned again. Nothing. Pan after pan after pan. All of them came up empty. The sun has begun to sink behind the mountains now, and the air has a real bite to it. The excitement I felt this morning is gone. It has been replaced by a cold, heavy lump in my stomach. I went back to the exact spot where we found the gold this morning. The hole is still there. I scraped every last bit of dirt from it. I panned it so carefully, my whole body trembling with a desperate hope. Nothing. Not a speck. Not one single flake of yellow. It doesn't make sense. It's like the gold was only ever in that one pan. Like magic. I started looking around, my eyes seeing things differently now. The hope is gone, and I am just seeing the cold, hard details. The ground in that one spot, it looks different. Pockmarked. Disturbed. A few feet away, half hidden under a bush, I found something. A piece of greasy cardboard. A shotgun wad. I found another one a few feet away. I didn't know what it meant at first. And then, a memory. A story I heard from some men on the trail. A story about salting. About firing gold dust from a shotgun into a worthless piece of ground. A story about kind old-timers with bad backs. A story about a single perfect pan of gold shown to a stupid, naive chachako. I think I've been had.
And so, on the bank of a cold, indifferent creek, another dream dies. The Chichaco's story, with its arc from breathless hope to hollow despair, was one of the defining, if rarely told, narratives of the Klondike. The salting of a claim was a cruel and brilliant deception, a crime perfectly engineered for its time and place. It relied on a masterful understanding of human psychology. The con man, the fake Jedediah, knew that his victim was not just buying a piece of land. He was buying the validation for all the suffering he had endured to get there. After the brutal ordeal of the Chilkoot Pass,
and the long river journey, the newcomer was desperate to believe. His judgment was clouded by exhaustion and by the infectious gold fever that permeated the very air of Dawson City. The single pan of glittering gold was not just a promise of future wealth, it was a confirmation that his immense gamble had been right all along. To doubt it would have been to doubt himself, and that was a burden too heavy to bear. This quiet, personal tragedy was the true Klondike experience for the vast majority. The legend of the gold rush is built upon the dazzling success of a fortunate few, but its reality was composed of thousands of such quiet failures. The men who truly struck it rich were often not the ones with a pickaxe and a pan, but the entrepreneurs and the swindlers who understood that the most valuable and easily mined resource was not the gold in the ground, but the hope in the hearts of the stampeders. They mined the miners, selling them overpriced supplies, overpriced whiskey, and in cases like this, overpriced and worthless land. They knew that a man who has wagered everything on a single dream is the last person who will question it when it seems to be coming true. We do not know what became of our Chichaco, sitting alone as the subarctic night closed in. The historical record is silent on the fate of the unlucky. Perhaps he succumbed to the harsh winter, another anonymous casualty of the cold. Perhaps he swallowed his pride and took a job chopping wood or washing dishes, earning just enough to survive. Or perhaps he endured, learning from his bitter lesson and transforming from a tenderfoot into a hardened sourdough, forever wiser and more cynical. His story is a powerful reminder that the frontier, for all its promises of rebirth and fortune, is often just a wilderness with fewer rules, a place where hope and deceit grow side by side in the frozen ground.
Tonight, we have sat in the quiet corners of 4 very different worlds, listening to the echoes of a single, universal complaint. We felt the quiet desperation of a son in Han Dynasty China, watching his father trade a lifetime of savings for the false promise of eternal life. We walked the muddy roads of medieval England with a devout pilgrim and felt the hot shame of her realization that her sacred relic was just a common bone. We stood in the empty, flour-dusted bakery of a Parisian artisan, his hard day's work stolen by a patriot's lie and a stack of worthless paper. And we shivered in the subarctic cold of the Klondike as a young man's golden dream dissolved into a handful of mud and a cruel deception. From the esoteric promises of an ancient alchemist to the cynical salting of a frozen claim, the methods of the swindle change with the times, but the target remains the same, the vulnerable, hoping heart. The desire for health, for salvation, for security, or for a life better than the one we have is the fertile ground in which these deceptions take root. The stories we have heard tonight are not of grand historical events, but of the small, personal moments when trust is broken and the world is revealed to be a colder, more complicated place than it seemed. They remind us that the sting of being cheated is a feeling that transcends time, culture, and language. It is a quiet human sorrow as old as civilization itself. Now, let these stories from the past recede.
Let the figures of Wei, Eleanor, Antoine, and the lonely Chichaco drift away like smoke. Their struggles are over. Allow the details of their lives to soften and fade, leaving only a sense of peace. Let the quiet of their worlds merge with the quiet of your own. There is nothing more to analyze, nothing more to learn. All that is left is to rest. May your rest be peaceful and your dreams be quiet. Until next time.